In Photoshop, it's always an advantage to know how your image is going to be output. For example, are you designing for print, or will you have images that'll be displayed on a screen? If you have this information, then it's much easier to figure out the size of the document that you need to work with. In this video, we're going to discuss the 4 most common ways to display your images: on screen, halftone printing, inkjet printing, and continuous tone printing. First, let's discuss the dimensions of a document that will be displayed on a screen, such as a monitor or a phone. What's most important in this scenario is the width and height of your document in pixels. All screens have a specific number of pixels, so your document needs to have enough pixels to fill the portion of the screen where the image is going to be displayed. The resolution of the file, the pixels per inch or per centimeter, doesn't really matter because the device is going to map a single pixel in the document to a single pixel on the screen. If the image has too many pixels, it might appear too large, and if there are too few pixels, it might appear too small. Or if the file is not the correct size, the device or the software that's displaying it might need to resize it, adding or removing pixels, and you might not be happy with the resulting resized image quality. With that said, today many of the technologies that display images on screen can detect the screen size of the device that the content is being viewed on, and will change the image's size on the fly as the image is downloaded to the device. If this is the case, then you'll want to create a document that is sized for the largest screen that you think it will be viewed on. Second, let's look at halftone printing. The most common example is the printing press. Although the image might start off as continuous tone, a photograph for example, in order to be printed to most conventional printing presses, the document needs to be converted into what's called a halftone pattern. The halftone pattern is made up of dots with a unique pattern for each of the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black inks. When the dot patterns are printed, one on top of another, they create the illusion of continuous tone. But it's not, in fact, continuous tone. If you look closely at anything that's been printed, like a poster or a box of cereal, especially if you look at it under a magnifying glass, you will see the individual dots. So in Photoshop, in addition to knowing the width and height of your document that you're going to want to print, you'll also need to know what resolution or how many pixels per inch or pixels per centimeters you need to print the quality of image that you want. And that depends on the line screen that you're going to be printing to. So on press, the line screen is heavily dependent on the quality of the ink in the paper that you're printing on. This is due in part to what's called dot gain. When you print on a lower quality paper, the ink tends to spread out when it hits the paper, and the dots tend to bleed into one another. If we look at a newspaper as an example, because of the coarseness of the paper, you can't print with a very high line screen because the dot gain makes it difficult to hold the details as the dots spread. You may be limited to an 85 line screen for a newspaper, for example, whereas if you're printing to a high-end paper for a high-end quality fine art book, you might be able to print as high as a 300 line screen. As a general rule of thumb, you need 1.5 to 2 times the line screen, or LPI, in pixels per inch, or PPI. For example, if you are printing to a 100 line screen, you're going to need between 150 to 200 pixels per inch. With that in mind, when preparing documents to be printed to the printing press, it's really important that you work with your printer, because together you will decide on a line screen based on the ink and paper, and then from there you can decide if you want 1.5 or 2 times the line screen to achieve the quality that you're looking for. Next is inkjet printing. Inkjet printers also print dots on paper, but if you look at the print under a magnifying glass, you're not going to see any halftone patterns. This is because inkjet printers vary the placement of very, very small dots of ink on paper. Inkjet printers print using cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, but many also have additional inks like light blacks or a darker cyan and magenta to increase the number of colors that they can print. An inkjet printer typically needs a resolution between 240 and 360 pixels per inch, depending on the desired quality of the print. I would recommend that you do a test and print the same image at 240, 300, and 360 ppi, or pixels per inch. I find that most people can see the difference between 240 and 300 pixels per inch. They'll be able to see that the 300 pixel per inch image will look like it's a higher quality. But fewer people can see the difference between 300 and 360 pixels per inch. Now, the viewing distance will also make a difference. If the viewer is an arm's distance away from the image, then you may need to print at a higher resolution than if the viewer is going to be viewing the print from across a room. And fourth, we need to talk about continuous tone printing. So printing to photographic paper would be a good example of continuous tone printing. If you're a photographer, you might be sending images to a color lab to have them printed on photographic paper. In this case, you simply need to ask the lab what resolution they want the file, as they're going to know what the optimal resolution needed for their printing technology is. Personally, it's been my experience that they typically want 300 pixels per inch. So in summary, if you're creating images for screen, you need to know the total pixel count for the area of the device that you're displaying your images on. For the printing press, your document will have 1.5 to 2 times the line screen, the LPI, in resolution, pixels per inch. For inkjet printers, you will most likely use a resolution between 300 and 360 ppi, and for continuous tone printing, it's really best to ask the lab what resolution it recommends. In the next video, we're going to see how to change the document size in Photoshop for a specific display and output device.